It's 3 in the morning, and you're still awake. Your monitor glows in the darkness, casting an eerie blue light across your face. You're a content creator, and right now you're experiencing something that nobody really talks about. The 3 a.m. shift. This is the hour when everything changes. If you're trying to build an audience, please subscribe to stay updated on the real truths about content creation. The 3 a.m. shift isn't just about being awake late. It's a fundamental change in how your brain works, how your creativity flows, and most importantly, how you perceive your own progress. When the sun goes down and the world falls asleep, something shifts inside the content creator's mind. Your inhibitions lower. The internal critic that screams at you during daylight hours suddenly goes quiet. You find yourself typing faster, editing more decisively, and committing to ideas that you'd normally overthink. This is the seductive part of the 3 a.m. shift. It feels like genius. It feels like pure creative flow. Your fingers dance across the keyboard without hesitation. You're making decisions in seconds that would normally take you hours to deliberate. But here's what nobody warns you about. That feeling of genius at 3 a.m. often transforms into regret by 3 p.m. the next day. The isolation is real, and it's profound. When you're working at 3 a.m., you're not just awake at an unusual hour. You're fundamentally separated from human connection. Everyone else is sleeping. Your friends are asleep, your family is asleep. The entire world has moved into a different phase of existence. You're operating on an island of consciousness, surrounded by sleeping people, and powered entirely by caffeine and whatever internal drive pushed you to stay awake in the first place. This isolation can feel incredibly freeing at first. There's nobody watching you, nobody judging your work in real time, nobody interrupting your flow. But isolation is also a form of psychological stress that your brain doesn't process well over extended periods. Your body chemistry becomes a chaotic mess during the 3 a.m. shift. Your cortisol levels are artificially elevated. Your melatonin production is suppressed. Your metabolism is confused about whether it's day or night. You're essentially running your entire biological system on emergency power. The energy drinks stacked on your desk aren't helping. They're making everything worse by creating a false sense of clarity while your body is screaming for rest. You feel sharp and focused, but you're actually operating on fumes. Your judgment is impaired, but you don't feel impaired. That's the dangerous part. You think you're making brilliant decisions when you're actually in a state of mild sleep deprivation psychosis. Content gets weird at 3 a.m., and not always in a good way. You start finding patterns that don't exist. You see connections between ideas that are actually completely unrelated. Your sense of humor becomes darker and more unhinged. Your perspective shifts toward either extreme pessimism or extreme optimism, with very little middle ground. You might create something genuinely brilliant. You might create something that makes absolutely no sense. The problem is you can't tell the difference until you review it with a clear mind. By that time, you've already recorded it, edited it, maybe even uploaded it. The audience metrics become an obsession at 3 a.m. You check your watch time every 15 minutes. You refresh your analytics page constantly. You watch your view count go up in real time. This is the 3 a.m. shift's most addictive element. There's immediate feedback. There's constant reinforcement. Your dopamine receptors are getting hammered with notification after notification. You feel like you're accomplishing something, but you're actually just feeding an addiction to metrics. This is what makes the 3 a.m. shift so dangerous for content creators. It doesn't just affect your sleep and your health. It rewires your relationship with your own work. You stop creating because you love it. You start creating because you need that dopamine hit from the notifications. Focusing becomes almost impossible, even though you feel focused. Your attention span is actually fragmenting into smaller and smaller pieces, but you don't notice, because you're jumping from task to task so rapidly that it feels like you're being productive. You work on your script for 7 minutes, then you check analytics for 4 minutes, then you edit a thumbnail for 3 minutes, then you scroll social media for 5 minutes. You're not multitasking, you're actually rapid tasking, and your brain is suffering for it. By morning, you'll have spent 5 hours awake, but completed maybe 2 hours of actual productive work. And this is the point where many creators decide to make it like and share this video if you've experienced this exact feeling. Your sleep debt starts accumulating, and you convince yourself it's manageable. You tell yourself you'll sleep more tomorrow, You'll catch up on the weekend. You'll make adjustments next week. But tomorrow night comes, and you're back at your desk at 3 a.m., doing the exact same thing. The sleep debt doesn't disappear. It compounds. After 3 weeks of 3 a.m. shifts, you're operating at a cognitive level that's equivalent to being legally intoxicated. You can't see it. Your friends might notice it. Your audience might not notice it yet. But you're degrading neurologically every single night. Creativity becomes less creative, paradoxically. Your brain isn't actually more creative when sleep deprived. It's just less inhibited. There's a difference. True creativity requires the executive functions that sleep deprivation destroys. You need your prefrontal cortex functioning at full capacity to make nuanced creative decisions. At 3 a.m. on your 10th consecutive sleepless night, your prefrontal cortex is barely online. You're operating from your limbic system and your reward circuits. That's not creativity. That's just impulsivity with a creative filter on it. The phantom productivity feeling is maybe the most insidious part of the 3 a.m. shift. You feel like you're getting so much done. Your desk is covered in evidence of work. You have 17 browser tabs open. You have 4 different projects going simultaneously. You checked 5 different analytics dashboards. You posted on 3 different platforms. By the time 3 a.m. rolls around again, you've created this elaborate illusion of productivity that completely masks the reality of your output. In terms of actual finished content, you probably created 1 piece of content, but it feels like 10 because you touched so many things. Your relationships suffer in ways that are subtle and then suddenly obvious. You're irritable during the day because you're exhausted. You cancel plans because you need to sleep. You can't explain to people why you're awake at 3 a.m. working when you could just work at 9 a.m. like a normal person. They don't understand the compulsion. You don't really understand it either, but you keep doing it anyway. The 3 a.m. shift starts to feel like it's part of your identity. You're the creator who grinds at night. That's your thing. That's your brand. And slowly, you've built your entire life around a schedule that's actively destroying your health. Mental health spirals are common in the 3 a.m. creator community, but nobody talks about them. You develop anxiety because your sleep schedule is chaos. You develop depression because you're isolated and exhausted. You start having intrusive thoughts. You catastrophize about your channel's future. You second-guess every creative decision we've ever made. And when 3 a.m. rolls around again, you think maybe creating content will make you feel better. Maybe if you just make 1 more video, 1 more post, 1 more edit, you'll feel like you're moving forward. So you create more content while in a worse mental state, which creates worse content, which makes you feel worse about yourself, which makes you stay up later trying to fix it. The algorithm becomes your obsession because the algorithm doesn't sleep. YouTube doesn't sleep. TikTok doesn't sleep. Instagram doesn't sleep. And if you're not creating content at 3 a.m., maybe someone else is. Maybe they're grinding harder than you. Maybe they're about to pass you. Maybe your window of opportunity is closing. This is the narrative that keeps creators awake at 3 a.m. It's partially true. Some of your competitors are probably awake, but they're probably just as exhausted and just as delusional about their productivity as you are. Your editing skills actually decline during the 3 a.m. shift, even though you think they're improving. You're making faster decisions, not better decisions. You're spending less time on details because you're impatient and exhausted. You're using the same effects repeatedly because your brain is too tired to think of new ones. You're relying on templates and presets because you don't have the mental energy to create anything fresh. Your editing becomes a mechanical process. It looks the same as your other videos. It blends together. And this is the point where successful creators sometimes realize they need to step back and think about what they're actually doing. Your thumbnail game gets worse too. You're making thumbnails at 3 a.m. based on what you think will get clicks in your delirious state of mind. You're choosing colors that seemed bright and attention-grabbing when you were exhausted, but actually look chaotic and confusing. You're designing for an audience that doesn't exist in your 3 a.m. brain, not what actually works. By morning, you might not even notice how bad the thumbnail is because you've been staring at it for hours. The 3 a.m. shift creates a feedback loop that's almost impossible to break once it starts. You create content in a sleep-deprived state. The content performs okay because you're consistent with your uploads. The performance reinforces the behavior. So you do it again the next night, and the next night, and eventually, you can't even create during the day because you're too exhausted. The only time your brain wakes up is at night. The only time you feel capable of work is when you're sleep-deprived. Your circadian rhythm has been completely inverted, and now your body doesn't know how to function during normal hours. Your diet deteriorates because you're awake at weird hours and your body is asking for emergency fuel. You're eating energy bars at 3 a.m. You're drinking your fifth coffee of the day at 7 p.m. You're making weird food decisions because your impulse control is shot. You're not getting nutrients. You're getting calories and stimulants. Your body is a machine running on low-quality fuel, and you're wondering why you feel terrible all the time. But you can't connect the dots because you're too exhausted to think clearly about your habits. The 3 a.m. shift makes you believe you're special. You're the one who's willing to sacrifice sleep for your dreams. You're the one who's grinding while others are sleeping. You're the one who's committed enough to do whatever it takes. This narrative is seductive because it's partially true. You are sacrificing sleep, but the secret that nobody warns you about is that the most successful creators usually aren't the ones sacrificing sleep. They're the ones who figured out how to create efficiently during normal hours. They're the ones who understood that sustainable creativity is better than unsustainable grinding. Your decision-making abilities tank during extended 3 a.m. shifts. You make poor choices about content strategy. You make poor choices about collaborations. You make poor choices about where to invest your time. These decisions seem fine at 3 a.m. when your judgment is impaired, but they look terrible in the morning. By then, you've already committed to them. You've already told your audience about them. You've already started implementing them. So you're stuck following through on decisions that your sleep-deprived brain made. The comparison trap is deeper at 3 a.m. They're scrolling through what other creators are doing while you're exhausted and emotionally vulnerable. You see their success and feel like you're failing. You see their uploads and feel like you're not working hard enough. You see their follower counts and feel like you're behind. But here's the thing. They're probably just as exhausted as you are. They're probably just as delusional about their progress. They're probably making the same poor decisions in the dark of night. You're all suffering from the same condition, but you think they're fine and you're the only one struggling. Your self-care completely disappears when you're in the 3 a.m. shift cycle. You're not exercising because you're exhausted. You're not eating well because you're eating for fuel, not nutrition. You're not socializing because you're isolated on your own schedule. You're not spending time outside because the curtains are drawn. You're not seeing sunlight because you're sleeping during the day. Your entire being shrinks down to the small area around your desk, and you wonder why you feel depressed and anxious all the time. The 3 a.m. shift teaches you that more work equals more success, which is one of the most damaging lies in content creation. You believe that if you just create more content, more hours, more late nights, you'll eventually break through. But breaking through requires strategy, consistency, and quality. It doesn't require sleep deprivation. In fact, sleep deprivation actively works against all three of those elements. You're not getting ahead. You're just getting more tired. Your audience eventually notices something is off, even if they can't articulate what it is. Your videos lose their spark. Your energy feels forced. Your personality feels manufactured. Your content stops being something they look forward to and becomes something they automatically watch because they're subscribed. You lose the emotional connection that made you successful in the first place, and you're too exhausted to figure out why. The 3 a.m. shift is insidious because it feels necessary. It feels like the price of success. It feels like what you have to do to make it. But here's what nobody warns you about. The most successful creators that you admire probably aren't operating on the 3 a.m. shift schedule. They probably figured out that success comes from being well-rested, not exhausted. They probably realized that sustainable is better than extreme. They probably made the hard choice to go to bed. Breaking the cycle requires acknowledging that the 3 a.m. shift is a form of self-sabotage dressed up as dedication. It requires admitting that you can't think clearly when you're exhausted. It requires believing that you'll still be successful if you sleep. It requires trusting that the algorithm will still exist tomorrow and your audience will still be there. It requires understanding that your health is more important than your metrics. These are simple things in theory, but they're incredibly hard in practice when you've convinced yourself that the 3 a.m. shift is your competitive advantage. The path forward starts with small changes. Maybe you don't work at 3 a.m. tomorrow. Maybe you create a bedtime and stick to it. Maybe you schedule your content creation during hours when your brain is actually functioning well. Maybe you realize that 3 hours of focused, well-rested work is better than 10 hours of sleep-deprived grinding. Maybe you understand that your audience would rather have 3 pieces of good content per week than 7 pieces of mediocre content. Maybe you finally believe that you deserve to sleep. If you've experienced the 3 a.m. content creator shift, drop a comment and let me know whether you regret the late nights or if you think they were worth it. I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspective because everyone's experience is different.